Welcome back to every episode of Death Battle reviewed in 10 words or less. A concept which I'm more and more beginning to regret making when a simple ranking is just as effective, but I'm stubborn, damn it, and I will keep this damn tradition going. Much like our Death Battle crew, who kept this series alive even after the show-stopping Season 8 we had gotten prior. But like I said before, as iconic as Season 8 is, there was still plenty of room to improve, which is where this season comes in. How did it fare? Let's find out by reviewing every episode in 10 words or less. Ready?
Whoa, pump the brakes. A thought just popped into my head.
I don't want to hear about who your multiple personalities told you to kill, Wade.
What? No, that's not what I... Actually, I can hear them debating about that. Can you kill him, please?
No, kill him.
Lord, my therapist is going to have a field day. What was I talking about? Right. How's about instead of giving away your scores at the very start, you save the 10 words or less gimmick for the season summary section?
No, that'd never work. Hey, I got an idea. What if instead of doing it at the beginning, we throw the 10 words or less section at the end?
Sure. Because if there's one thing audiences hate, it's spoiled.
This is the best season of the show. Yeah, I realize I'm jumping the gun a bit there, but I really want to set the mood for how this list is gonna play out. Cause this season felt like Season 8 gassed up on power thirst. But instead of 400 babies, we got 17 banging episodes that, while not all of them were perfect, each had merits that let them stand out in their own right. The larger emphasis on introducing new franchises proved to be a massive breath of fresh air for a show that has always seemed hesitant dipping its toes outside the usual comics and manga pool. From mainstream TV audiences to the champions of rich and expansive lore. There are other reasons why I consider this season the best, but I think it's better for me to go through each episode first and let the reasons sprout organically. That's right, y'all. No more convoluted plot lines and unnecessary cameos. Season 10's on the way, and I don't feel like releasing another feature-length film, so we're getting right into the action this time.
I can still be here, right?
I said unnecessary cameos? Grab a seat, dude.
Oh, you're too kind. I would love to. If only I still had, a butt to sit on things with.
Be careful what you wish for, buddy.
Little mouse fighting a scorpion, and that is final. Shut up! Oh my God, I don't care!
Deku versus Asta. Yes, this is my least favorite Season 9 episode, but not for the reasons you might think. Right off the bat, I understand that this one is far and away the most controversial episode of the season. The public outcry from the announcement alone would have made Korra vs. Storm blush, and the amount of dumbasses complaining that Asta didn't one-shot Deku not knowing how crafting and entertaining fight works was insane. But I haven't seen anything My Hero related since Season 4, and I only knew Asta as that one character everyone matches up with Predator. I mean Meliodas. I'm pretty sure I hadn't even heard the name Black Clover before. So all things considered, I went into this as a neutral party, with the exception of one lingering bias which I'll get to soon. The analyses were good at covering both of their journeys and succeeded at showing why this matchup is Deku's most thematic one. Sorry, Hunter x Hunter fans. And they managed to escape the pitfalls of manga spoiler avoiding for the most part that had plagued previous episodes. The running gag with the lockers was neat, and the cutaways exist. It's the fight that leaves me wanting for more, unfortunately. Right out the gate, as thematic as this fight is, having Asta go against a non-magic user is a massive neutering of the amount of abilities he can show off. And the choreography in general kinda sucks.
Lord, help me, they Season 7 the poor boys!
The hit and run strategy got old quick, a lot of hits and camera angles felt like afterthoughts. Why did this final clash send them quickly down, but then we saw Asta falling much more slowly afterwards? The Detroit Smash scene has become infamous in the community for taking one of Deku's strongest moves and giving each of the 4 successive punches the weight of a fly swatter. At the very least, the last one felt more in line with the move's power thanks to the vocal delivery. My thoughts on Jose Estrada, aka Brown Bakugo, as Deku are a little mixed. It's always cool when they get someone renowned for their portrayal of the character outside the show, giving this casting choice the same vibes as Valentine Stokes' Reverse Flash, which is awesome.
Kanchan? What do you want, Deku? My water broke. What? I'm giving birth. The fuck? I'm pregnant, Kanchan!
And it's a really good impression, don't get me wrong, but sometimes the general direction felt misplaced, particularly with the inner monologue moments. It's great they were included, but instead of taking a more methodical approach, it felt too fast-paced and not as confident as it should have been. But I can live with that since his battle cries are friggin' legendary, and the last one perfectly gives off the impression that he's putting everything into this final clash.
You wanted my best? Here it is! 1 billion%! Blood Ultra!
And this is competing with Michael Kovac, who is one of the best voice actors to be on the show. While his character is a little more straightforward here compared to others, there are still some fantastic shouts that are downright bone-chilling.
Hit me with all you've got, because I'm never going down!
But while I do like the performance, I can't shake the feeling that it was sort of wasted on a bad character portrayal. I've never read Black Clover, and if Asta is anything like how he acted in this animation, then I really have no incentive to. He is such an obnoxious jerk the whole time, and not even in a charming way. Like, chill the fuck out, dude. This is supposed to be a tournament. What if your parents are watching?
Oh, wait. You can't.
On that topic, who was watching that? Aside from Mr. Crybaby Devilman, I didn't see anybody in the audience.
I just assumed it was the same crowd as Persona 5.
We don't talk about the faceless people, Nate. They can hear you.
I constantly get conflicting answers as to whether or not he was actually in character here, but even I can tell that something was off. What happened to him being an intelligent fighter? What happened to him being able to sense ki? What happened to Liba, the character they said became like a brother to Asta? But the thing that really tanks this episode for me is that lingering bias I'd mentioned. You could tell that this animation desperately wants to remind you of All Might vs. Might Guy, one of the best anime episodes of the show. There are callbacks to it in the song, which is a banger by the way. Deku is the literal successor to All Might. Deku even borrows from All Might's own line of dialogue during the climax. In a vacuum, I don't mind these kinds of references when they're fitting. But context matters. When All Might said he was gonna show Might Guy his very best, that was out of respect for his opponent and wanting to give him a great fight. But there's so much animosity between Deku and Asta in this fight, and it feels so out of left field for them. If you're gonna be a successor to Might Might, then go all the way. Let the two of them exchange some lines of dialogue before the fight starts, wishing each other luck or something, as opposed to perpetuating the jock-like stereotype with Asta. As funny as Michael's delivery was here, instead of having Asta get upset about the anti-magic thing, have him be excited for an interesting challenge. But most of all, fix the terrible kill. It was only an honorable mention on my worst deaths video, and it probably would have gone further if it wasn't so recent. Somewhere in the number 15 to number 10 range. The idea of Deku going all out could have worked if he had more incentive to do it than just trying to show Asta up. And I don't mind him thinking he had won in his final moments. It could have given the ending a bittersweet tone, which Season 9 had been really great at up to now. But make it an actual fake out if you're gonna go that route. Why wouldn't you show Asta getting up after Deku's eyes go gray and just cut out the falling bit entirely? And instead of having Asta stab Deku in the back like an asshole, have him get ready to defend, then use his ki sense to realize Deku tragically died when he wasn't supposed to. Maybe he could run up to catch Deku's body like Clark did. You could even keep the running gag, but instead have him say, "Nice fight, Detroit." That would have been far more respectful to both fighters than this Family Guy death pose we get. And did the crowd know this would be a fight to the death? Why are these maniacs cheering? Wait a minute. Where the fuck did everyone go? It's so frustrating having to compare this episode to one of my favorites and winding up so disappointed from the missed potential. A lot like that other penultimate anime episode. But I don't hate this one. As I said, a lot of it is bias that makes me rank it so low, and the sprite team still popped off on the beautiful effects. I've seen mixed opinions on Deku's sprites, but I'm honestly a fan of the style this artist has. Nick returning as the announcer is awesome, and the Mr. Satan cameo was godlike. I also like the idea of Asta's bull moose nature rubbing off on Deku once his initial strategies have been drained, even if I would have preferred a different tone that didn't butcher Asta. And even though the death was shit, the lead up to it with both characters clashing colors and the All Might appearance was incredible. Though I'll never understand why Deku got his final battle cry, whereas Asta sounded like he was recorded in a Pringles can. I could see why people love it and other people hate it, but for me, it splits right down the middle. Not bad for the lowest ranking episode.
From now on, I'm going to refer to him by the loving name of John Yautja.
Mr. Bob A. Feet vs. Predator. For those who have seen my worst deaths list, I'd imagine this placement isn't all that surprising. That's not to say that everything about this episode is as bad as the death, but there isn't that much else going for it, especially when compared to the rest of this show's modern Star Wars episodes. Bob had an alright analysis and nicely juggled the different timelines. Even when Bob wins, he still loses. Don't worry, I'm not gonna call him Bob the whole time. Predators was pretty disappointing, honestly. I get wanting to focus on the film most people are familiar with. The OG movie is a classic after all, but I was really hoping to come out of this episode with a more enriched knowledge of the Yautja species as a whole, but it's mostly just focused on weapons and references to the 80s film, which can be especially frustrating for fans like Nemesis who know way more about that stuff than me. I've gone over the fight's lowest lows before, but it does have some awesome highs. Cameron Nakat's performance is stellar. The grunts and yells of pain sell how much of a beast Predator is, and he manages to have a memorable presence despite only having 5 lines.
And one of them was, "Ah!"
The Blender crew pulls out arguably their best-looking close-quarters combat to date with the middle fight, the sound design on the spear scuffle being a particular highlight. There are a bunch of raw moments as well, such as the beautifully shot disarm and Boba Fett cauterizing his wound with a goddamn lightsaber. That alone makes him a contender for Season 9 MVP. But as awesome as these moments are, there are other little details that, after multiple viewings, start to muddy the viewing experience. The over-reliance on the magic satchel technique can get really tiring. This isn't a situation like Link vs. Cloud where it's a normal thing in their games and could be written off as actual magic. Here we get weapons getting manifested out of explosions and thin air. And as much as they were hyping up this predator as the peak of its species for this hypothetical kerfuffle, it's a fucking dumbass. Since when do warriors with hundreds of years of experience catch missiles with their bare hands and stab trees as if their opponent was just gonna wait there politely? Boba called this dude amateur. That is not an insult that should be fitting this guy, who I'm just gonna borrow from Nemesis and call John Yautja as well, since it's less of a headache to write a script for. I already went over it before, and I still stand by placing the death so high up on the list from last time. It really is that dumb and immersion breaking. I wouldn't be harping on it so much if the results hadn't. They made such a big stink about the epicenter of the blast and outrunning it, so of course I'm gonna ask questions when John seemingly didn't even set a countdown timer and we cut to Bob walking away a little winded. You know what? I'm sick of not having any answers, so it's time to get them right from the source. Now's the time, Wade.
First off, thanks for the tip. Secondly, the time? For what?
Remember when I asked you to invite Boba Fett over for an interview? I know you two know each other.
Oh, yeah, that, Well, Boba T was still pretty salty after the way I, trounced him in that rap battle way back when. Don't really blame him, entirely understandable. So when I called him to come on the show, he just swore at me, hung up, and about 3 business days later, I received this sucker in the mail.
Holy shit!
I know, metal, right? Who could have guessed the head would still be intact after that explosion? It also has this syringe that says something about, resurrection.
Ah, I see where this is going. Well, guess we might as well go with the next best thing.
Hey, I'm alive. Neat.
Pleasure to meet you, John Yautja.
Whoa. How'd you know my name?
I'll be asking the questions here, buddy. So, I gotta know, what led you to picking a fight with the world's greatest bounty hunter?
Well, I saw his hat, thought to myself, hey, I want that. So I tried to get the hat and put it on my head so that I could look cool.
There is no way that thing would have fit on your ugly mother-flippin' face.
How did you get possession of a dark scythe despite not being a spearmaster?
Duh. Space Amazon?
So you really can get anything online these days! Jeff Bezos, you madman!
And finally, what led you to activating the unalive move despite not taking any serious damage that would warrant ending your life honorably?
I'm a petty stinker. I literally kill people for fun.
Truly fascinating.
Wow. To think I felt bad for you since Fett and I hate each other. But it turns out you really are just a complete and total moron with 0 redeeming qualities. I now have 0 sympathy for you, you ugly monkey fighter.
That's what the point of the mask is.
Any parting words you'd like to say before we let you go?
Yes, please kill my existence in agony. I'm just a head, I can't pay taxes. Can you spot a 20?
Well, hate to be rude.
No, Deadpool, wait!
Guess we should have been wearing our green pants today. I'll go get them up.
Man, fuck this. The episode's mid anyway. Let's just move on.
You know, now that I look at it, I really like this color on me.
I'm going to kill you and then kill you again.
Jason Voorhees versus Michael Myers. Okay, now we can talk about this one. I'm sure some of y'all were expecting this to be at the bottom, but truth be told, I think this might be one of the most overhated episodes ever. The analysis segments are some of this show's absolute finest. Framing it like Wiz and Boomstick are telling us ghost stories at a campfire is such a vibe. And the way the additional hosts bounce off each other makes me want to see more of this kind of banter from them. It's a little strange how there's basically no calculations at all, but I'll take an analysis that focuses more on the characters over one that just lists off a bunch of verses shit any day, and it helps add to the idea of a bunch of friends shooting the breeze while camping. Especially the teleporting argument. We all have those moments in our friend groups. My one issue with the analysis is that the final payoff with Giga Chad coming, appearing behind them as a shadow was a total cop-out, but it at least added to this episode's chilling atmosphere. Why did people hate this one again? Oh yeah, there's a fight animation too. I'll be real with you guys. The janky SFM animation and zoomed in shaky cam is off-putting, but it doesn't really bother me that much. Because like I said before, context matters. And when you know about the amount of terrible IRL shit that Devil Artemis, this episode's sole animator, was going through at the time, then yeah, I can excuse the funny running man opening a car door like he's from Robot Chicken. The fact that this episode exists at all is nothing short of a miracle. No, my friends, the real reason this episode is so low is based on elements that, even if it was animated by DreamWorks, just straight up do not work on a conceptual level. Remember how that Tom and Jerry movie came out and it focused mostly on an annoying white girl despite the film being called the Tom and Jerry movie? Twice? Well, take that same principle and apply it here, cause who the hell would want something called Jason vs. Michael to focus on some nameless randos that completely shift the focus of the fight away from what we came here for? I get that they wanted to replicate the climax of your average slasher flick, but you can't really take what a movie builds up for roughly 90 minutes and directly translate it to an out-of-context 3-minute animation. We don't know these characters, so we don't give a shit about them. It's just really distracting. But not as distracting as this episode's plot holes. So you all know what that means. Hey, what do you think you're...
Why does Pamela say the blackest eyes spiel to Jason? You would think she wants him to kill Michael, but then she says kill her. I haven't checked his Twitter profile lately, but I'm pretty sure Michael's a dude. Was it supposed to be a Hulk vs. Broly situation of catchphrase swapping? Also, isn't Pamela supposed to be middle-aged at least? Why does she sound like she's in her 20s?
The blackest eyes. The devil's eyes.
How did Jason pick up this body to use it as a weapon? It's not like they both decided to teleport right next to her. She was all the way by the car. What happened to the sleeping bag body? What happened to your face? Why didn't this guy immediately die from that swing to the axe? I get that it's a game mechanic or whatever, but the dude brushes it off like he got a splinter or something.
Big, huge axe, and it just cost a slice.
Did he really think he'd be safe hiding behind a gravestone 10 feet away from 2 immortal serial killers fighting to the death? What happened to your speed boost? And was Jason really so uninterested in Michael that he decided to kill this dude mid-fight? Why does it spend 15 seconds on Jason walking away? That's so boring. Think of the amount of things you could do in that time. Like heading on over to Quizzeek's YouTube channel to subscribe for awesome content.
Hey! Who the hell are you?
Oh, the name's Quiz. I'm a friend of Raccoon Bro.
Okay, well, could you get out of my house?
Subscribe to Quizzeek!
Well, that was weird.
I know. What an unwarranted third-party interruption that completely stole the spotlight from the characters everyone actually clicked on this video to see.
I think we might have taken this bit too far.
Yeah, I'll wrap it up. I'm not asking for much. I wasn't expecting these two to throw out a bunch of judo kicks in Muay Thai. But even Freddy vs. Jason, as bad as that film is, actually gave us Freddy vs. Jason for the most part. Where were the fake outs? This battle only had one when there should have been like 4 or 5 minimum. It would have made the lingering shot work more since Michael getting back up could have been considered a more likely possibility. But this animation isn't meritless. The atmosphere is top notch, I appreciate the grainy tone, and the kill is actually pretty great. We see Jason on the back foot, literally, as he's motivated by his mom to give it one last try. We even get a close-up of his eyes to show the shred of humanity he still has lingering compared to Michael, who's just a shell of a man. Then the two stab each other, which immediately shows off the difference in durability as Jason shrugs it off for a glorious decapitation and stylish flourish to top it off. A true chef's signature, if you will. If the entire episode was like this climax, we'd be seeing a much higher placement easily. I think it was pretty clear the team was struggling to come up with ways to make this work as a full 3-minute fight, which is understandable considering the characters being used, but I'm still more than happy this episode exists. Oh, and one last rant for all you "it should have been live action" elitists. Do you honestly think the team can just pull live action shit out of their ass willy-nilly? There was a fucking pandemic right after the last one. Ben and Chad haven't even been able to record in the same booth until season 10. Where the hell are they gonna find the time to get together costumes, a camp set, lighting, catering, gore effects that don't look like utter shit, and so many more factors? I cannot emphasize the gore enough, by the way. Nothing against the crew, but they can't even get gore right for their superhero fights. Did you really think they were gonna figure it out for an episode involving serial killers? So next time you complain to the team for not putting together the infinite resources needed to make an episode live action, maybe try to learn the process of what actually goes into making a professional looking production. Until then, settle the hell down, eat your food, and shut the fuck up!
Want to talk about Marvel vs. DC and Dragon Ball for a bit?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm shaking in my custom baby seal leather boots.
Scarlet Witch vs. Zatanna. Why? Why did this episode out of all the meme edits made for this channel get so many goddamn views? Not that we're complaining, obviously, but what the actual hell, man? It's not as if the episode itself is a masterpiece or anything, though I do think it's pretty dang good in spite of its inherent limitations. The analysis segments still hold up and did a great job walking us through their stories and how incomprehensibly powerful they are. The voice acting from all three of our hosts, Lisa Foyles in particular, really sold the gravity of Wanda's No More Mutants moment, which helped the No More sound part of the fight stand out even more. It was also a nice change of pace to see a battle that really could have gone either way, with it all coming down to one factor. And I like how that one weakness was teased for a moment in the advantages section while Wiz and Boomstick were going over their similar stats. It's a cool moment of anticipation. The fight continues the ongoing saga of the sillier, charming DC character stealing the show from the pissy, stick-in-the-mud Marvel character. It's no secret that Zatanna has quickly become one of the most beloved characters on the show, even getting her own immortal meme in the same vein as Thawne, the other most popular DC character on Death Battle. Even when she's in trouble, she's always trying to put on a good show for her audience and is simply having the time of her life fucking with this random Russian lady. It's clear Lauren Mayfield had a blast recording this one.
Ta-da!
But that's not to say Cassandra Władysława wasn't giving her all either. Her dead serious tone bounced off Zatanna in a great way, and the No More Witches reveal wouldn't have hit as hard without Wanda screaming her freaking lungs out, or Zatanna's spine-tingling delivery as if she's right behind you ready to end your life before you even have time to be afraid.
No more witches.
Aside from that, this battle had a lot of that looked really cool moments that stand out thanks to the sprite work. The curtain transition was smooth as silk, the bunny humping was charming. This Superman punch was hilariously well timed. I like how the aspect ratio kept getting played around with, and even when Wanda killed potentially billions, Zatanna kept a cool head by continuing to fuck with her with a juggling move that's way harder to animate than you might think. I do think this episode is cool for what it is, but there's also not that much incentive for me to rewatch it. When you use two characters that are said to be capable of infinite wonders, your 3-minute animation will always have a difficult time reflecting that. It's the exact same issue Strange vs. Fate ran into. Granted, the problem was much more apparent there, since it felt like we were actually getting close to the upper reaches of their powers here thanks to the multiverse scene and other eye-popping visuals, though I still find the superhero brawl in the middle to be really unnecessary. That time could have been used for other omniversal shenanigans. At least Thor got some sweet, sweet revenge. This battle has a lot of cool moments that feel haphazardly sewn together, fitting for a fight as show-stoppingly impossible as the fighters, I suppose. Also protect trans rights!
This guy might be better than me. You're right. I am better than me.
Gogeta versus Vegito. My condolences, Digimon fans. I'm conflicted. I hope it isn't a secret by now that I am a hardcore Dragon Ball fan. The OG series is in my top 5 anime shows ever, after all. And this episode would act as a love letter to the series, and it's a season finale for a season that had been praised for introducing new franchises and spinning twists on the overused ones. I guess the logic was that they wanted to end the year out with as much spectacle as possible, but while I'll forever defend Red vs. Blue for being a same series matchup, that episode at least used different characters. We're just watching two dudes punch each other that are practically the same in every way. The hosts even go out of their way to emphasize this about their personalities and fighting techniques in the results. Even as a Dragon Ball fan, I found this matchup announcement to be super underwhelming. But I am still a Dragon Ball fan, and I was able to enjoy how much this episode loves the franchise as much as me. We had a fun little framing device with our hosts, the historical perspective bits were neat, and we got some pretty swag did you know factoids that'll yoink the spoink of at least 4 people. The animation is very pretty, and it was cool seeing 2 of this show's best screamers working together, which combined with the dragon dance made for an incredible sounding climax. The tiny detail of Vegito using Kaioken at the last second was appreciated. Every transformation pops with that same kind of aura energy that made Broly's episode stand out. While they were inevitably rushed, I could appreciate the reasoning behind some of them, like how Gogeta went from 4 to blue so that his tail couldn't be exploited again. But overall, it felt like the choreography had an over-reliance on references to past Dragon Ball fights instead of making new stuff, even if some points were creatively shot. There was nice spectacle, and I enjoyed the episode overall, but I was not convinced that this should have been the finale, with the only argument I can think of being this fist bump moment, since it acts as a pretty fitting closer not just for this fight, but for the year as a whole. If I'm being brutally honest though, I'm not even sure that it should have been a match at all. Yes, it's technically the closest fight this season, but the way the answer was found is so friggin' boring in comparison to the other close fights. Was anybody really itching for an answer to this matchup? It was pretty much stated outright from way more sources that Vegeta was superior. Goku versus Goku would unironically be way better. At least then we could have had some sort of difference in personality and techniques. Also, by the way, Earth's Dragon Balls grant 3 wishes now, not 2. Do your research, guys, like, come on. Seriously though, talk about a cop-out with the Wiz and Boomstick fusion. It's not like it couldn't be done either. They are cartoons after all.
Not as much as me! Oops! I came in too early, didn't I? I'll just, yeah.
What was that about?
Just ignore it.
Why don't we get things back on track by hearing a word from Steve? After all, this is an episode that he's very passionate about, which is why he requested this time to relay his thoughts on it. So what did you think of the episode, Steve?
It sucked.
Okay, thanks for coming, Steve. Try to think of this episode like the Mario movie. If you're a fan of the source material, there's tons of Easter eggs and references for you to appreciate. But when judging it all on its own, it doesn't have quite as much substance as its peers to latch onto. But at least the animation and music are still fantastic regardless. Side note, props to the Mario movie for becoming the highest grossing video game film ever in a week. Eat shit, Blizzard!
It's the end of the world as we know it.
Oh, it's quite all right. I've grown tired of living. Ah, very good then. For the best.
Yes, indeed.
Black Adam versus Apocalypse. The fact that this isn't at the very bottom and isn't the most boring thing ever is a testament to how much Season 9 stepped up this show's game. I mean, it's Black Adam versus Apocalypse. How do you make that interesting in an unironic way? Well, the animation makes choices that help it stand out from your average cape shift fight, like opening up and ending with the comic panels. Granted, that's something that could have been done for any superhero fight, but I'm glad it was given to one that needed more identity. The premise is a very natural crossover, and thanks to the analysis detailing everything Adam has done for his country, we understand the stakes immediately. Falling Gods is another interesting case study in that it gives off major Kings of Infinity vibes, yet it somehow fits much better here for some reason. It could be because it feels more like a grungy street fight given all the close-up brawling for possession of the city. This little scuffle right here is my favorite, by the way. And the electronic beat almost feels like it belongs in a super factory, which absolutely fits Apocalypse. Either that or it's just that the song is better. Take your pick. There were some cool sound design choices, such as with the moon getting destroyed or Kaiju Apocalypse getting depowered. While it doesn't sound impactful, that's because it's supposed to feel like we're hearing it from thousands of miles away. We also get more of those sweeping shots of the 3D background that I can't get enough of. Somehow the characters being sprites makes the environments feel so much more grand in scale. While I do have some issues with it, I think the audio mixing is more to blame than the performance itself. Wolf Williams is a great Apocalypse.
Your kind will learn to fear me soon enough.
I could barely understand a word Apocalypse said. He should probably get his hands on whatever lozenges made Darkseid sound like Weird Al.
Weasel stomping day.
He shuts down pretty much all of Adam's attempts to be cool. No selling the punches at the beginning, shutting down his phone a friend move, catching the lightning with his bare hands. Cameron Nakad may have given yet another guttural performance, but Adam hardly got anything to do, which I think weirdly works in this case.
I refuse to relinquish my home to you heretics. Shut up!
Instead of coming off as disrespectful, to me it shows his unwavering tenacity when it comes to protecting his home, even against the most impossible of odds. But this is Death Battle. He's not getting some underdog plot armor out of this one. I really appreciate how unwaveringly brutal they got here. Apocalypse didn't just want to beat Adam, he wanted to dominate him. Phrasing. Some folks say that Adam's face here makes the scene unintentionally hilarious, but if I just had my head stamped into the ground several times, I'm sure I'd look like a Muppet too. I still love how the camera continues to be broken even in the results. These were all really good choices to help give this episode a unique identity, but at the end of the day, it is still a Marvel vs. DC episode that just so happens to be hard carried by its music and death scene. There were plenty of interactions that straight up did not make sense, like how Adam is holding the death seed here, but instead of crushing it, his entire arm is just outside of Apocalypse's body in the very next shot. For some reason. Or how Apocalypse goes kaiju and you think Adam is gonna try to blitz him, only to get immediately one-shot by a single punch. Though it's made up for by the screams of writhing agony from the decimated populace. Don't look at me like that. And the analysis, while detailed, is also carried by those fancy lightning effects. The episode really was about as good as it could be, and was quite the step up from its DBX. Oh goody, another off-screen kill, because fuck you, why not? Crazy to think that we're already done with all the Marvel vs. DC episodes. My, how the times have changed.
I introduce you to the fantastic world of gay sex.
Thor vs. Vegeta. Yes, I wasn't exaggerating earlier. We really have been discussing comics and Dragon Ball characters for the last 4 entries in a row. I promise this was a coincidence.
Or was it?
No, it definitely was. But out of all the season's, for lack of a better word, run-of-the-mill episodes that you would have expected at any point in the show, this one stands out as my favorite. Not even halfway through this list and we're already at the episodes I consider great or better. Oh yeah, it's go time, people. Negatives out of the way, yes, I'll concede that the analysis on Thor's end just sort of drops the story stuff abruptly and pretty much talks about his powers exclusively. Returning combatants go burr. Vegeta luckily had the advantage of needing an updated analysis since his last one was over 10 years ago. Hot damn. And yeah, the choreography of the fight is pretty doo-doo fecal matter. The Yarnbjorn scuffle is so bad, it's almost a parody. Really unfortunate how much was cut from the storyboards. And Thor spends a lot of the battle as Vegeta's punching bag before realizing I can punch too and killing him. But I'd like to defend this for a moment with how I personally interpret this version of Thor. First off, the way Thor was written here complements Jonas Scott's voice so much better than last time. Dude's a great voice actor, but something about his performance in the 1D episode felt kind of off. He felt too confrontational for my liking, but here he's so much more jolly and leans more into the ye olde style of speaking, which I feel leads to a really great performance.
Did that count? No fear, only hunger!
On top of that, because he's taking things less seriously here, complimenting his opponent and making jokes that unintentionally lead to a fight in the first place, I find it more plausible that he'd be taken aback by this mere mortal's power. So because he was unable to process the might of his opponent fast enough, that's what led to those beatdowns and juggle combos. I also like the implication that the Ultra Ego one specifically was so massively powerful because Thor himself is, who accidentally let Vegeta borrow some of that power, at least for a moment. But those explanations might not be enough for you, and that's alright. But I refuse to let anyone tell me that this fight isn't amazing in terms of presentation. The real secret weapon of this episode is the sound design. Every single punch and blast has so much oomph and raw power behind it. Just listen to the initial Ultra Ego punch or Big Bang attack, or literally every time Mjolnir is used. The sound design on that thing alone makes it one of my personal favorite fictional weapons. More pluses on the audio side of things, Princess of Pride is the textbook definition of Viking rock. And after having seen The Northman, watch it if you haven't, Amleth is a badass, it makes me appreciate this episode's Viking aesthetic even more. It feels like a true battle of the manliest warriors in the galaxy. We haven't gotten a level of testosterone like this since Hulk vs. Broly. Fitting, I know. Oh yeah, and Nick Landis as Vegeta. What more can I say that hasn't been beaten into the ground? It's Nick Landis as Vegeta, one of the most iconic voice performances on the internet, period. DBZA may have ended, but with these screams and egotistical line reads, we can rest easy knowing he's still got it.
I have evolved beyond gods. I am the Prince of all Saiyans, and you can burn in hell! All you will feel is oblivion!
The climax. Dear God, the climax. Everything before, mediocre in comparison. This shit is 11 out of 10 brie. Thor's last episode may have had more destruction technically, but when these two powered up, it caused the fabric of reality to go apeshit. Yes, most of the dialogue was references to past Dragon Ball and Marvel stuff, but I can hardly care when they lead into each other so naturally and they're delivered with this much energy. And while the God Blast was surprisingly pitiful, the final flash had me floored. This episode, by the way, should be the gold standard for how you do fake outs. For one, it can actually legitimately fool people, but more importantly, it takes what would have been a pretty good kill, though admittedly this would definitely be in the high tier of disintegration deaths, and goes for a more creative approach. Thor takes his own advice and uses the weight of Mjolnir to crack Vegeta's head like a spiky watermelon. And instead of a quirky one-liner, he lets out this primal scream of a warrior that just emerged from the hardest fought battle of his life. The sound design, the voice acting, the hand-drawn stuff, everything in this final minute is perfect. And I love how awesome it makes Thor without trying to replicate the MCU. Thor coming back from the final flash all bloody and gasping for air while choking out Vegeta supersedes anything the movies have done. While I have a soft spot for Thor vs. Raiden's crude yet appealing style, this is definitely Thor's best outing. And I'm really glad he got a redemption this cool after his last episode being unfinished. More than 1D's redemption at the very least. Stupid trees. Why is that the one thing these episodes have in common? Even if it's a bit more style over substance in the same vein as Deku vs. Asta, this one is infinitely more rewatchable to me thanks to the way the story is told. Presentation and animation shall never be underestimated again after 2022. Also, please stop malding. Vegeta never stood a chance, you babies.
Good news! We're not dying! We are going to live forever!
Hercules versus Sun Wukong. By the way, I'm gonna be saying Heracles throughout this section, don't at me. Fun fact about Raccoon Bro. Growing up, he and his family would sit and read a book that told Greek myths in a digestible way, so Greek mythology has always been a part of his life. As for Sun Wukong, I mean, he's a fan of Dragon Ball. What did you expect? At this point, we were starting to cry foul at the claim that this season would be full of surprises. Not helping was that a majority of the episodes had already been teased after the season 8 finale, most of them being comics or returning series with only a couple new franchises. Then Pandora's box was quite literally opened when they said, "Hey, we're doing mythology episodes now."
Oh my god.
This opened so many floodgates, and this was the episode that truly made me realize that Season 9 would be something special. This was the first time in a while where I was actually looking forward to the analysis more than the fight. I love mythology so much and was happy to be getting a gateway look into these two guys that have inspired so many characters after them to go from zero to hero. I wasn't disappointed in the slightest with how seamlessly both fighters' stories and feats meshed together in possibly my favorite analysis of the season. And it already has a bunch of other ones to compete with, some that I haven't even talked about yet. I even found the cutaways to be more charming than usual with some pretty well-paced comedic timing. I guess if I had to have one nitpick about this part of the episode, I really wish they had used more footage from Lego Monkey Kid. I understand why they wanted to stick to the more accurate stuff, but come on, that cartoon is awesome. More people need to experience its greatness.
Not as much as me! Aw, man! Come on, Pinky, get your head in the game! You're losing your touch!
Okay, I feel like I should be concerned about that.
I said ignore it.
The biggest thing in this animation's favor is the context of how it presents itself. Treating the battle like an actual myth complete with narration was a stroke of genius. And the inky canvas aesthetic, not unlike Okami, was super fitting and beautiful to look at. Heracles' stoic rage against Sun's laid-back demeanor led to great moments of comedy like with the transformation bit.
Behold me, the immortal Monkey King!
Multiple heads. Of course.
While it obviously couldn't cover everything, I appreciate how much of Sun's powers played into the choreography, where a lot of it was toying with Heracles by keeping him at bay, whereas Heracles outmuscled and outsmarted these tricks to close the gap. Props to all the voice actors across the board. Blythe Melon had exactly the kind of deep, heroic tone I'd expect from the god of strength, and Alex Mai captured that trollish yet carefree behavior we all know the Monkey King for. My favorite part of the choreography is how Sun uses his staff. It's a creative weapon, and I'm a sucker for the ever-extending stick style of weaponry, especially when it's used to its limits like here. Really, there's only a couple of little things I would have changed. Some of the dialogue could have used a new draft, like how we get the "I am Heracles" call out despite it being the beginning of the battle and not prompted by anything really. And I've said my piece before about how the death is pretty disappointing, and that includes the weird dialogue. Maybe he could have said something like, "Would you look at that? Guess I don't know my own strength sometimes." But it was number 25 on that list for a reason. It still has that storybook tone with the ethereal hero's journey playing in the back as well as Christian Young's warm narration voice. So the sourness is very short-lived.
With a formidable foe slain, stricken against the mountain's breast, so ends our great tale of East and West.
I can't wait for more episodes like this one in the future, because if Herc vs. Sun was any indication, the team is likely to treat these mythological heroes that mean so much to so many people with the respect and sincerity that they deserve. That being said, if someone chooses not to check this one out for religious reasons, don't try to bully them into watching it. It's immature and quite frankly disgusting. Just watch Dragon Ball and Monkey Kid instead. And Hercules too, that movie's underrated. Speaking of Hercules, this really was not The Rock's year, huh? Dude's movies are bombing, but more importantly, he lost twice in the same season of Death Battle. I'd be more sympathetic towards the guy, but this is also the same dude with an ego so massive that he pushed for a live-action remake of Moana starring himself only 7 years after the first one. So yeah, I don't really give a fuck.
Oh, shit.
Twilight, what are you doing here?
Get down, dingus!
Bonus episodes have always had a rough reputation on this show. Episodes that are categorized as being official, yet not really due to not being counted in the season's official numbering. They've ranged from shitposts to shit, so we've never really had some kind of standard for these sorts of episodes to base themselves off of quality-wise.
Huh? Well, it's 5 o'clock. I could go for a beer, sure.
But now, I think it's safe to say we finally found that hit in a mound of misses. That's because this episode is still treated like a normal fight, just with a few different yet fun little asterisks. Mostly the analysis. And guys, if I counted this episode among all the rest of the season, This would be my favorite analysis of Season 9. Possibly the whole show. It does what a proper filler episode should do, and instead of making the same unfunny joke constantly, it takes this cool down time to flesh out our characters and expand the world. It's fun to see what our hosts are up to after hours and how they play off each other in a non-professional capacity. I love details like Jocelyn being the lo-fi girl, or how Boomstick sleeps with a nightcap on top of his net hat, which has Major Sandy wearing a cowboy hat on top of her helmet energy. The segments themselves are presented as the two hosts talking up their preferred sides. Notice how almost all of the Warframe backstory is explained by Wiz and vice versa. This favoritism continues into one of my favorite moments of the show, the calc-off. The back and forth is infectiously fun and made even more rewatchable thanks to the music. It's like that one part from Randy vs. Kool-Aid Man with the added benefit of not interrupting the fight. I don't even care that the stories are barely touched upon, cause it's presented more as two friends arguing passionately over the stuff they love and what makes it cool. The battle itself ended up being an impromptu byproduct of their bickering. The animation on its own? It's pretty good. It's another Jason vs. Michael situation where the analysis carried, but this fight at least has a lot more going for it. Like how it focuses more on Raiden's breadth of weapons that didn't appear last time. And while it does look pretty and flashy, I wouldn't even bother comparing it to Raiden's last fight. That episode's choreography was a lot tighter, and moments like the Jack the Ripper scene hit way harder. I'm not even gonna touch on how the deaths compare. At that point, it's just kinda sad. It also just seems really unfair to bring Raiden back after all this time just to get utterly decimated. I know that stomps are inevitable, but even by death battle standards, this is pushing it. Even if he killed Excalibur, the pilot is still like a bajillion miles away. There's no friggin' way he could have won. But our voice actors do a fine job, and I even liked how Wiz and Boomstick interrupted the fight very briefly for an actually funny exchange. It didn't mess with the pacing too much, and it helped add to this episode's unique vibe. Brandon Yates' Metal Lotus is also one of this season's highlights, despite not technically being in the season. It was practically ripped right out of Revengeance, and is great to listen to on its own. If Death Battle ever does more sponsored stuff in the future, I wouldn't complain one bit if they just copy-pasted the format of Excalibur vs. Raiden, because I would take relationship and world building over this any day of the week. I would put this one just below Thor vs. Vegeta.
You're not gonna shoot a puppy, are you, Jack?
Yeah, in the face. Why?
Bond. James Bond versus John Wick. Back to the trend of unconventional episodes. While these two aren't quite as out there as mythology, it's still nice getting more representation from literature and film, which is why it felt fitting that the analysis would be good at going through their stories and even painting a picture of what their mysterious pasts were like. The running joke of name-dropping every single James Bond movie was pretty cute, and aside from a couple on-the-nose ones, it could be easy to miss on a first viewing. I wasn't as big a fan of the pen gag, not even because it was unfunny, but because it also got kinda distracting, mostly in Wick's analysis. Luckily, that didn't detract from these segments being great character studies not just on how, but why these two kill. Though it is bittersweet watching this again after John Wick 4, since that movie was awesome, and it's likely never gonna be talked about on the show, at least for a long while. Speaking of movies, anyone want to see a feature-length Bond and Wick crossover? Cause seeing this animation makes me really want that. The crossover aspect of this show is wonderful, but rarely do I ever walk away from an episode thinking it could work in an official setting. This is the exception. I was surprised by how naturally these two coexisted in the same universe. The way they talked about the hotel's rules, or Wick asking about MI6. This animation may have been average length, but I was really glad to see slow moments like this give a feel for the world Death Battle imagined. The banter felt like just the right amount of Bond says something snarky, while Wick responds with stoicism and sudden outbursts of rage. Stephen Kelly may have been doing his Obi-Wan voice pretty much, but it worked as a pretty great all-encompassing version of the character.
Seems you've got me at a disadvantage. You won't mind giving a dead man walking one last smoke?
Mornal was a damn good Wick pick, and I had already been a fan of her ever since those Ace Attorney videos made by that one The Ghost of Molly McGee animator, Paula Paroff. So it's cool to see her showing off more of her range.
Killing isn't permitted on company grounds.
Lucky me.
The animation starts off rough, and I mean really rough. Even when it gets better, it's still hard to get past that really off-putting Daniel Craig model.
Hey, why do you have that strange look on your face?
What strange look?
But the worst is this one little scuffle. We still get cool gadget and dialogue moments, and once Wick tackles Bond to the ground, the step up in quality is fairly obvious. The pen was used in a badass yet funny way that cleverly transitions into the best part of the fight, the car gun. It is such a cool backdrop to this already well-executed knife fight. I've always appreciated when fight scenes add that one little element to help give the set piece more personality and stakes. This is where Secret Service reaches maximum levels of sex. It's a great big band track by Darewolf. The choreography does a good job consistently showing that Wick is the superior superior fighter, and while Bond is no pushover, he gets his main advantage states whenever he puts his sneaky artillery and quick wits to use. The references to their films were also a neat touch. You know they had to include one of the most iconic shots in cinema somewhere, and it worked like a charm. What didn't work quite as much for me was the death, at least one aspect of it. I love how the watch laser was established earlier, and it's once again a great display of Bond's quick thinking. I just feel like Wick himself gave up a little too easily, especially after having seen John Wick 4. I won't spoil anything, but if you know, you know. Him saying yeah was cool at least. And yeah, so was the final exchange between Bond and Q. While I did have a few more problems with this one than I remembered, it's made up for by the engaging story and reverence for the modern and classic icons of action heroes. And if you still think this one should have been live action, you dropped this.
I have no idea how to breathe.
Tanjiro Kamado versus Jonathan Joestar. I know it was like a million entries ago, but I still can't believe they gave Asta the advantage of sword better than punches when this episode came out the exact same year. Also, yeah, this one is great. Tanjiro had a pretty mixed bag of an analysis, because while I liked hearing the talk about lungs and Tanjiro being rightfully deemed the team mom, it was pretty clear they took the criticism to heart from Mikasa's analysis and overcorrected with the manga spoilers. There's practically nothing to this one since they're so hesitant to delve into the deeper parts of Tanjiro's world, which is especially unfortunate for Demon Slayer's debut. At least Jonathan's was great, feeling like a true successor to Dio's with editing that had loads of personality and pretty funny writing that complemented their journeys. I like the to be continued joke at the end. Yes, I am immature. Could have done without other things like how they promoted Wim Hof's dangerous methods, and I definitely didn't need either of the two meme references. A Pickle Rick joke in 2022? Have some class. And would you people stop saying the nickel joke anytime two things are similar? It was only ever funny in the movie, and now I dread that scene anytime I rewatch it.
But didn't you also make the nickel joke?
Hey, I did it before it was cool, and now it's just really annoying. I am sick of all these stupid cartoon memes getting run into the ground.
Not as much as me!
Oh, for the love of Pinky!
Hey, don't look at me! I've been listening for my cue correctly each time!
Context. Listen for context.
I told you we should have used the pinky signal! That method is way more fun!
Okay, would you please just tell me what—
Look, it's a joke, it's gonna be really funny, so give it a chance, you Diet Biff Weed Man!
Alright, jeez! Remember how unexpectedly emotional Popeye vs. Saitama got? Well, I think the crew definitely paid attention to the feedback and wanted to try their hands at tugging the heartstrings a bit more this season. But we'll get to that. This fight is beautiful to look at. I was really worried about how they'd approach a Demon Slayer match considering how iconic the animation from that show is. But they were able to get down the lush environments and even replicate the sword effects in a way that, while obviously not as impressive as the anime with millions of dollars in its budget, still looked clean as hell. I love how they leaned into those inner monologue moments where we find out our fighters' game plans. Another Blake vs. Mikasa inspiration, funnily enough. But this time it's a good thing since I love those moments there as well. And the only way they can work is if you have the right actors. Voice acting for these two can be a challenge. While doing a protagonist voice is fairly standard stuff in the anime world, that's what makes it really hard to stand out. And these two are up there with the best performances of the season. Zach Marr, who some of you may know as Sylvie, does a phenomenal job carrying a lot of the emotional weight of the fight while still balancing it out with those quirky team mom moments.
Oh, I'm sorry, sir. Did you bump your head?
And if you think any of his dialogue was ableist, kindly go fuck yourself, dumbass, who probably also thought Randy Savage's death was disrespectful to the real-life man. But even dumbasses should be able to see how great Benji Buckley is as Jonathan. I was not expecting this gentleman to steal the show and compete on my list for best performances of the series, but he made the Boy Scout character actually interesting by really leaning into that gentlemanly flair. Even when he's threatening best girl Nezuko, he does it with so much over-the-top chivalry that takes a page out of Percy, one of the best characters from Epithet Erased. Not the best, I'd never turn on my boy. But what really puts Benji on top of so many others this year is the chilling battle cries that start out at a 10 and somehow manage to keep rising and rising in intensity.
You fight with valor, noble swordsman, but I know the burning passion of my heart will carry me through! Sunlight, yellow!
I desperately want a fan dub of him and Tom Shulk doing part 1. I'd even take an abridged. The choreography can be hit or miss, mostly towards the beginning where the movements feel a little too fast. I couldn't even tell there was a headbutt here. And that death. god, the attack was awesome. Breathless Blade sounded incredible, and the tension leading up to it had me on edge as the race began to see how the gap was closed. Then afterwards, we get that emotional moment I talked about before. And it's good, but it definitely could have been better. Jonathan immediately crying at the mention of Nezuko being Tanjiro's sister does have a bit of Martha energy to it. Is it as bad as that scene? Goodness no. It's just that the pacing definitely could have used more breathing room. But the Mercy kill was a really fitting touch, and I like the ambiguousness of the ending as Nezuko's nails grow for a single frame before going dark. It was a great way to adapt the emotional moments we get from JoJo's and Demon Slayer. All that was missing was a 10-minute long story about Tanjiro as he was dying. Can't win them all. Even though there were plenty of nitpicks, I have it up this high since it's loads of fun to go back to still. Even Tanjiro's analysis, while bare bones, still felt like a nice introduction to Demon Slayer. I'd even argue this as being the most important episode of Season 9. Tanjiro versus Jonathan walked so that all the drama-heavy episodes to follow it could run.
Let the Dungeons and the Dragons begin. It's D&D. Fight with the legends of yore. It's D&D. Never kissed a lady before. Nope.
Sauron versus the Lich King. We're getting into the heavy hitters now, with our first all-star episode being for two characters with ridiculous amounts of lore that I was really afraid I'd be overwhelmed by. But no, this ended up being a great gateway episode for Lord of the Rings and Warcraft on the show. You'd think a main protagonist or something would be ideal, but Sauron comes from roughly the very beginning of Tolkien's story, so it was actually an ingenious method of setting up Middle-earth for future episodes. And the Lich King is so iconic, it was only natural he'd be the first Warcraft rep. The analyses were really good at showing these two worlds and stories the amount of respect they deserve by keeping the in-your-face comedy limited to small jabs and quips, even if their engaging recitations were inevitably undercut by the ad breaks. I even like this cutaway for having a payoff I didn't see coming. What I did see coming, though, was the animation's quality. Hell yeah, baby! The Blender crew is finally back to their bread and butter. High fantasy, loads of abilities, cinematic scope, this is where they thrive as a group. I know I've used that word before, but this episode is truly the best example of this show getting cinematic with the way these shots are framed and colored. Sure, they could have tightened up the sword fighting a bit more and maybe fixed a couple wonky movements, but those weren't the main focus. I came to this episode wanting to feel the heat and power behind Sauron's swings, and the chilling stench of death in Arthas' spells. I like how the writing for both characters is kinda similar, but has very noticeable differences that even help paint Sauron's experience advantage. The dude shows up like he's Gilgamesh or something and is like, yo, that's my throne, I'ma needs that back now. While Arthas is ironically a bit more hot-blooded in his approach, sold expertly by Philip Sacramento. Fitting it was the Lord of the Rings episode that cemented his status as the new Sean Bean. He's got warmongering psychos down to a T.
I'll tear out your heart. You will find nothing there.
Oh, that line was so freaking cool. Sauron's voice actor didn't disappoint either. Even if it was basically a Black Doom impression, I love how he rarely shows any emotion, only getting venomous when a mere mortal had the gall to call him his servant.
Serve me now. I serve no one.
Other than that, when you've been in battles for thousands of years, it's understandable that they'd all start to blend in after a while. A soulless being that was brought to life brilliantly by Ryan Soulless. Well, how about that? As awesome as these two 3D models are, almost feels like an official cutscene at points. What makes these visuals truly cinematic, besides the scale of course, is how they tell the story. Even if there was no dialogue, all we really needed was this opening shot of Sauron's shadow covering the Lich King's throne to understand the vibes of these two and what's at stake. And after that jaw-dropping volcano eruption, the oranges start to clash with the blues as both parties fight for this land with even crazier spells, transformations, and most evil of all, spoilers. But once Sauron gets the upper hand and downs Arthas like a Gatorade, fire engulfs the once icy mountain. This is a grade A death for multiple reasons. 1, Beowulf's One King to rule them all reaches its climax and sounds amazing. 2, the thought of the Lich King armor, and by proxy Arthas, becoming an empty husk is super freaky. And 3, it's all topped off by that sweet shot of Sauron sitting down with smoke emitting from contact. That is figuratively and literally metal, as is this whole episode. If I was more of a fan of either franchise, it could have even made it to the top spot. Goes to show just how spectacular it is.
I've got a bad case of Clussy fever, and I want to make Whoopi with her cushions.
That's disgusting.
Harley Quinn versus Jinx. I'm just gonna say it. If Yoda versus King Mickey hadn't set the bar so astronomically high, Harley versus Jinx would be my favorite season premiere. If season 10's is just as good, we'll finally have an actual pattern of standout premieres that get you excited for the rest of the year. Now with an episode like this, your enjoyment of it is bound to fluctuate depending on how much you tolerate funny haha crazy ladies in fiction. I'm not personally bothered by them, and I appreciate how in-depth they went into their their backgrounds to show that there's a lot more to them than their cheery grins. I especially like Jinx's as a fan of Arcane, and it was really clever how they started with her vanilla stuff and then went to her backstory later on, since that's pretty much the order of how we learned about her in real life. Some folks were bothered by Ringmaster acting as an ad for League, but I didn't really view it like that. I mean, heaven forbid we get to learn more about our characters by seeing what they're passionate about and how it might have shaped their relationships from an early stage in their lives. Also, I don't play League, so I was appreciative of the short 101 lecture so that we could see how Jinx's in-game abilities might translate to a fight. A fight that, in this case, is stunning to look at. When it comes to 3D fights especially, the environment our characters play around in can make or break the choreography. A nighttime carnival where our fighters could interact with a variety of rides and attractions could not have been more fitting, since these are the kinds of chicks that know how to fight to the death and have fun doing it. As much as I love seeing the well-animated parkour and the flashy weapons, the reason I had so much fun watching this is because the characters are having a blast. It's no surprise they'd be kindred spirits, but I really liked how in the beginning, even though they're still trying to kill each other, they'd still play along with one another's twisted games. Jinx didn't have to light up Harley's dynamite, but she did. Harley didn't have to treat Fishbones like a real person, and Jinx certainly didn't have to make Fishbones look sad after being called a traitor. But they did. Why? Because it's funny to them. But that doesn't mean their smarts got sidelined. Jinx refusing to spit out the dynamite seems stupid, but then we get to see the payoff later when she sticks it in Harley's boxing glove. And yes, this scene is better than the one from Batgirl vs. Spider-Gwen. The music actually stops to get the humor across, and I have an easier time believing that Harley would let an explosion happen to her. Not to mention it's followed up by one of the animation's best shots as we get a fantabulous explosion perfectly aligned with the vocals and Mad Laugh Riot. A personal favorite of mine since I'm an edgy punk bitch. The teleporting on the roller coaster was great, but I think we can all agree the standout moment was Jinx getting infected in the House of Mirrors as those Arcane-inspired visuals kick in. This is where Elsie Lovelock especially shined at selling our Master of Mischief's broken psyche. Felicia Valenti did a fantastic job too, being a near-dead ringer for the OG Arlene Sorkin, who I just found out is married to Christopher Lloyd, but not the Christopher Lloyd I'm sure you're all thinking of. Yeah, a real Tom Holland situation, am I right? Where was I going with this? Oh yeah, Harley voiced good.
Aw, thanks, pal. Traitor!
These two had some impressive lungs considering how much laughing there was, a part of voice acting that a lot of people underestimate the difficulty of, especially the maniacal kind.
Hey, Sniffle, you got a light? Sure thing!
Jinx's sanity is so tilted that she even semi-breaks the fourth wall, which ends up becoming a super smooth mirror transition as Harley taunts from the background by psychoanalyzing her opponent. But as cool as it was to see Harley flex her doctorate like Ninja Brian, Jinx came back with the infallible "You're a nerd" comeback, which sent Harley into oblivion, marking this our first non-Marvel win against a DC character, I know right, and an explosion death that wasn't half bad thanks to the visuals, a neat nod to Joker vs. Sweet Tooth's ending. If I had to nitpick, this fight does have an over-reliance on the magic satchel technique, but it's not nearly as egregious as Boba Fett vs. Predator. Plus, the cartoony tone of this battle makes it not as distracting, and while the models clash a bit, considering how expressive they are, especially for a 3D fight, I think it cancels out. I'm sad this episode doesn't top more people's lists. I understand if these characters aren't your cup of powder, but for me, it's consistently entertaining from start to finish and sets a nice tone for what we could expect from the rest of the season. From a quality perspective, at least.
That's right. We're going back in time to the first Thanksgiving to get off the menu.
Xenoverse Trunks vs. Archie Silver. You heard me right. Trunks vs. Silver, considered to be the most boring matchup in Versus history, hit the top 4 of my favorite season. Improbable, sure. Impossible? Not for the world of Archie and Xenoverse. Comparing the analysis segments of Archie, Sonic, and Silver goes to show how far we've come. Silver's analysis has great direction in its presentation. It was also a good idea including Jocelyn to help, or at least make an attempt, to streamline the infinite amounts of mayhem our researchers had to sift through. I liked Trunks as well, though it made me kinda wish we had gotten an episode of his main timeline first before going into the spin-off stuff. And the whole not this thing, that thing joke was definitely overused. Obviously, it's the fight that really helps land this one so high. So what crazy plot twists can we expect? What unique storytelling methods were used to help this one stand out? Not that much, surprisingly. The motivations are standard but fitting, and it's pretty much just straightforward action. But keeping things simple and focusing more on the high-octane moments actually worked to this episode's favor. It was honestly kind of a breath of fresh air since most episodes up to this point had more of a story or spectacle focus. Not many focused on the actual fighting. While it may be a simple plot, the choreography is really well thought out. Anytime the gap is closed, Trunks is able to blitz Silver with his superior fighting experience. Conversely, anytime Silver is able to create some distance, that's when he Uno reverses all of Trunks' attacks attacks to gain the upper hand. All of these energy beam moments look incredible, especially when Silver redirects 2 beams at once, carries them all the way back from Earth, and uses them to supercharge the 3rd beam. The effects all across the board were stellar. The Super Saiyan God moment was the best Dragon Ball transformation of the season. The sword struggle was both intense and a mindfuck, and the moon getting used as a weapon was everything I could have asked for. Every Dragon Ball fight needs to do this now. Yet another explosion timed with the music. Edge of Tomorrow is so freaking cool, man. Thanks for watching, Logan. Just as cool as our voice cast. We would have had a collective riot if Scott Frericks wasn't brought on as Trunks. Even though he doesn't sound like the OG voice, Scott has even gone on record about this in the past. Because it's his normal voice, it means we get an authentic performance that focuses on his ability to be a little awkward and scream like a warrior. Side note, I really loved the inclusion of the card scene as a form of comic relief. The OG nut inside me lost it after I went back and found out that Oolong had been summoned too. Poor guy can't catch a break. Also, the crap baskets reference was very much appreciated. But this episode's big shocker was Esuwansti as Silver. I've never heard of this guy before, couldn't even look him up anywhere. But it's still a standout performance with loads of energy behind every attack cry. Almost like they've been in the voice acting industry for a really long time.
I don't think we're in Mobius anymore.
You know, he even sounds like Silver's current voice actor, Bryce Papenbrook. But hey, if this Esu person is anything like Bryce, I'm sure they're a cool guy.
I just hope trash like me isn't getting in the way.
Thank you for the solid contribution, Nagito.
Silver may not have had that many lines, but I appreciate the little moments included for him to be his dorky self. A dork that I, and many others, couldn't be happier for. Okay, so I've made it very clear that the victor doesn't sway my thoughts toward an episode, on paper anyway. Something tells me I would have liked Iron Fist vs. Poe just a teeny bit less if my boy hadn't come out on top. And where would we be in a world where Thawne and Zatanna didn't get their mile-long grins that have gone down in legend? Human beings are always gonna root for someone, and we especially love a good underdog story, or in this case, underhog story. The reason everyone hates this matchup is because, under normal circumstances, it's painfully obvious. But by using their alternate versions, the debate became much more interesting and close, which is especially encouraging if you've been a longtime member of the Versus community, whereby you would know of Trunks' fucking ludicrous win streak across every show, give or take. No one had been humiliated more than poor Silver, and we were already getting the hedgehog-sized coffin ready for when they'd have to inevitably fight on the biggest Versus show of them all. Then after time got distorted, shout out to both actors, they killed it.
Chronos Tantrum! Eternal Time Labyrinth!
Death Battle did the impossible. They made It's No Use actually cool. Oh, and Silver finally got a win after arguably the closest fight of the entire show. Even though that sword got thrown back at him, Trunks didn't just let it hit. Silver had to put his all into this one. I don't even mind the lack of dialogue afterwards, cause what the hell can you say after an experience like that? Seeing our little Skrunkly redeem himself after all this time was beyond cathartic, even leading to what many consider the best reaction video of the year. Combine that with this being the first episode to release on Raccoon Bro's birthday, it's a wonder it didn't make the top. But seriously, barring the outside factors, what puts this above something like Thor vs. Vegeta is how well thought out the choreography is. While the former has a godlike finale, Trunks vs. Silver feels like a more complete package. There was a more interesting back and forth and the beatdowns felt earned. Not just there to give the obvious loser more chances to shine, as well as lightening the blow from potential fanboy backlash. Something not even this episode is immune from. My biggest criticism is that it kinda ruins Flash vs. Sonic now that we know how much crazier they could have gotten with it. But while the fight is infinitely rewatchable, these next 3 episodes take bigger risks that not only paid off, but showed off the kinds of stories this crew is capable of telling within a limited amount of time. Don't you dare.
I've never said this, but don't swallow.
Omni-Man versus Homelander. Okay, remember how I said the last one was predictable in some cases? If that version of the fight was a shit stomp, then this is a diarrhea stomp. Except here's where things get interesting. The underdog is the character no one was rooting for. And I do mean literally no one. Even the Twitter account for the boys commented on this matchup and was looking forward to seeing John die. First, let's talk about the analyses. For an episode that was pretty much made specifically for the casual audience, I certainly don't blame them. I was surprised by how much I enjoyed these segments. Yes, they don't delve into spoilers, but it doesn't really feel like we're missing that much when compared to other, more fantastical worlds like Demon Slayer and My Hero. We got all their powers and a thorough understanding of their stories, at least as much as we needed to paint the difference between these two psychologically. It helps that the animation itself is clearly more focused on earlier points in their stories, given Nolan is still living on Earth, and I'm also pretty confident that we'll be getting Nolan again in the future after Invincible's show has had the chance to cover more of the comics. boss. And it would be pretty fitting for him to get upgraded to a more challenging opponent like Bardock, being able to show how far he's come. Maybe even throw in a callback to his fight with Homie. That'd be neat. And while both endings were abrupt, I liked them both for different reasons. With Nolan, it was a pretty powerful statement about how Mark started his path towards redemption. As for John's, I just thought it was funny. This whole analysis is funny, and I will never get this image out of my head. Thanks. But at least it's masked out by the animation, and what the hell, why does this episode look so good? It's not a direct ripoff, but it harkens to Invincible's style in an eerily close way. Aside from Wick vs. Bond, this might be the most natural crossover writing of the season. Even detractors agree that John's opening monologue was incredible. The dialogue was original, yet felt like it came right out of the boys. It was a natural build-up to an oh shit moment. We even got a little hint that something was up when Nolan looked to his left for a split second. Everyone's motivations are easily identifiable, and best of all, after Homie got done using his strongest weapon, his manipulation, Nolan defied John's overly verbose ways and cut right to the chase.
I'm going to feed you your own heart. Yummers.
I'd call this line raw, but pretty much everything Nolan says is raw as hell. I love how this country line calls back to when he annihilated the Flaxons without being a direct quote. And from here on out, it's Nolan teaching this man-child a lesson by showing him what a real Superman knockoff can do. All of Nolan's movements are precise and have purpose, while John is flailing around like the cracked-up child he is. I said before how no one was rooting for Homelander, and that's not because he's a bad character. He's one of the best-written villains in TV history. We don't hate him, but we sure do love to hate him. This episode also came out before season 3 of The Boys, so this was the first time for a lot of people to see Homie struggle. Some folks were miffed by how one-sided it is, but hey, you people asked for this. You wanted the 1,000-year-old warrior to fight a guy who's used to never even having to throw a punch. Did you really think he'd keep his cool after getting decked mid-sentence and taught how to fight by the guy he's trying to kill? What's more, when season 3 did come out, it proved this episode's choreography completely right. Except Homie ain't gonna be escaping this bout. So while the actual fighting isn't anything crazy, we did get some crazy awesome moments like with the plane that referenced both shows at the same time. But even though we all expected this to be a stomp, Death Battle did manage to keep us on our toes still by including the super yell. That hardly mattered in the long run though, because once Homie's true colors got revealed to the world, any semblance of sense he might have had left completely evaporated, sending him into a tirade of threatening everyone Nolan knew, including his son. It was at this moment John knew he had fucked up. Not to downplay him killing Debbie at the beginning, the reveal was incredible. But would you be more angry about someone killing your dog or your child? Yeah, I think I'd want to stop playing around at that point and put the psychotic man baby down too. I've already gone into detail about what makes this death perfect in my best deaths list, but just know that it's likely going to remain in the top tier for a long time to come. But let's not forget the audio side of things. Diabolical Invincible Me sucks. As a title, the song itself kicks ass. I think it's really cool how there's 2 versions of it, to help replicate the use of licensed songs from the shows. Plus it has this cool dystopian sound to its percussion that I can't get enough of. As for the voice actors, these are some MVP performances. Yang Ya returns from his previous role as John from the Battle Royale, and thank God he was brought back for a second chance to give a real performance that actually takes advantage of Homie's stage presence. While it may not sound like Anthony Starr, it does sound like Homelander, with all the PR smarm to boot.
So, do we have an understanding?
Get the fuck out of my country.
But he's also excellent in the second half where he has to drop the facade and exclusively scream like hell.
And every goddamn person you know!
Yeah was so good at making us root against him, and I mean this in the best way possible. And then there's Tom Shulk. Considering his previous performances, and an upcoming one, this is by far his most low-key appearance on the show. Despite not raising his voice and only grunting a couple times, he still manages to be terrifying. Even if it's monotone, you can hear the venom behind these line reads. And even a bit of snark that cracks me up. And that final scene where he rips off Homie's jaw and stares into him with those burnt eyes, 2 simple words is all it takes to make John shit his pants.
Now swallow.
No, wait. I meant mine. You even feel a bit of sympathy towards him at the end. He may have put the rabid animal down, but he's gonna have to break the news to Mark that this Christmas will just be the 2 of them. Oh, yeah, this is a Christmas episode in May. Don't question it. And don't question a one-sided matchup ever again, too, because this episode is definitive proof that, with the right writing, it can work. I don't care that it's short, quality over quantity. And this was a perfect fight for the hand-drawn team, too, considering the limited abilities. Not unlike Jack vs. Afro. It helps make this production look even more professional. And I wouldn't be surprised if that, combined with the mainstream appeal, has helped this one slowly climb its way up the views. Only a matter of time now until the king is dethroned. Wade, I seem to recall asking you to use the Goku vs. Superman graphic here.
Whatever happened to your whole quality over quantity sentiment?
Whatever. You shouldn't just take my word for it. Let's hear from our resident Isabel main on what truly makes this episode pop off like none before it. Give it up once more for Zachary Lyon.
Oh man, it's my time to shine again, Mom. I'm in a Raccoon Bro video again. This time though, instead of talking about something that pisses me off, I'm talking about something I really like. I'm talking about DILF versus The Very Last Incel, God's Final Mistake. So I've watched both these shows and enjoyed them a lot. Probably the only media involving heroes that I've enjoyed in a long while. With both having some very effective villain characters, seeing these two titans clash was something I'm sure everyone wanted, and it certainly didn't disappoint. So let's start at the beginning. The analysis segment, pretty good, which says a lot coming from me. I might get some shit for this, especially since I'm not exactly the world's biggest Death Battle fan or a member of the community at all, really. I'm usually pretty lukewarm to the analysis segments of Death Battles. I'm sorry. It's uncommon for me to find any gags that funny, although I appreciate the animation wholeheartedly. The barometer in my head for how much I enjoy an analysis segment usually comes down to, will my dad think I'm cringe if I show him this video? If there's one thing that counterbalances that, however, it's in the name, analysis. I really like how the characters are broken down, especially when it comes to raw numbers. A bit contrary to that, what makes me appreciate this Homelander versus Omni-Man analysis lies in what they didn't say. There's only so much you can go over while limiting spoilers, which you really need to for shows like these. And I think the Death Battle crew did a pretty damn good job doing that. Did a pretty damn good job using what little they could to truly show what each character is capable of. Only using more prominent scenes that everyone knows, or small filler scenes that don't use much context was an excellent touch. My favorite part about all of that, though, is that the analysis is pretty obvious foreshadowing to how fucked Homelander gets while revealing as little as it needs. So the fight? Immaculate. Their banter before and during the fight was a super nice touch. Homelander starts cocky, only to break down the more outmatched he seems to get, perfectly reflecting his infantile nature in the show. Completely opposite to that, Omni-Man coldly rebuttals Homelander at every turn, like talking to a mere child, educating him on... Like talking to a mere child, educating him on... Fuck, goddamn you, you dumb bitch!
You can do it. Try again.
Completely opposite to that, Omni-Man coldly rebuttals Homelander at every turn, like talking to a mere child, educating him on why he's a fucking lesser being, a worm, indignant scum. Just like his show, too. Is my bias showing yet? We get this kick-ass dialogue while we watch Homelander get cock-smacked by a dude with gray hairs already. I'm sorry, y'all. I don't see how you fuckheads can complain it's too short when I got to watch someone get so absolutely shambled, people make goddamn video essays on it. It's a good fucking fight. Death Battle animations could be hit or miss for me at times, but this invincible style they went with was exactly what it needed, considering that Homelander was just that inconsequential to how much more powerful Omni-Man truly is. I really don't have much more to say on it. It basically speaks for itself. Overall, I give this episode an objective rating rather than a subjective one, and it's God, if every Death Battle was this good, maybe my standard of living would increase by a slight yet noticeable increment. Alright, thanks for having me. For next time though, I'd prefer if I wasn't kidnapped from my place of work and forced to record a segment for the Raccoon Bro content empire. I need to pay rent too.
Wait, no, you weren't supposed to say that. Now that that's settled, we've reached the top 2. Believe me, it took a lot of soul searching, but I finally settled on my number 2 of the season. Now, fair warning, the transition gag I planned for this one is a little longer than normal, so just indulge me on this one, guys.
I see miracles every day. What would you do if you were watching that video for the first time and he says, my little boy looks just like me? With the video footage that he's saying over it, it's just him holding him over the Hoover Dam and he drops him down it.
Is that why he gets rid of him? I took care of that real quick.
He tumbles down all the way.
I thought you were gonna say he says that, and it cuts back and he has his child's face.
No! That's brilliant.
I might have taken things too far this time. Magneto versus Tetsuo. Trunks versus Silver was how you take a boring matchup and revitalize interest in it. Omni-Man versus Homelander was how to take an obvious stomp and tell an interesting story. This episode is both of those things, combined with the idea that just because a new franchise is being wasted on cape shit, that doesn't mean it can't become something so much more. When it comes to Marvel, Magneto had a top-tier analysis segment. It was a perfect balance of exploring his character arc while communicating how unexpectedly broken the power of magnetism is. Comparing Eric and Charles to real-life activists felt natural, and Dummy's appearance wasn't too shabby as well. It feels like it's been a while since he's been used for his original purpose of actually demonstrating how certain powers work or the science of destruction, and hearing him talk about the existential dread of ego death just felt right. Tetsuo had a great analysis too, and I appreciated the time dedicated to showing where the manga and film differed. That final line from Wiz was also the perfect way to cap off Tetsuo's story, priming you for the feels you're about to experience soon. With all this in mind, it starts to become a little more clear why these two were paired up. It wasn't just because of psionic abilities. There is legit crossover potential in Eric finding an angry kid with similar powers, almost like a grim reflection of himself, and trying to put him down after realizing the kind of trauma he'd been through. It's also pretty easy to buy Tetsuo immediately picking a fight with someone flying around his city. But before we get to the depressing stuff, whoo, does this episode have a great aesthetic. Despite taking place in an apocalypse, the setting is eye candy by leaning into the neo-dystopian vibes of a grungy city, almost like cyberpunk. This is strengthened by the breathtaking visuals of Magneto and Tetsuo's contrasting colors and possibly my favorite Werewolf track, Ego Death. That's right, I love punk rock and synthwave. It wouldn't be out of place in Stranger Things. It's not only pleasing to listen to, but once that choir kicks in, it accentuates the dramatic moments perfectly. While the fight doesn't get that crazy in the first half, it's still some pretty solid back and forth. Between this and Mob vs. Tatsumaki, I just really like how the sprite team handles characters that use telekinesis. I love how this one building just can't catch a break. Tetsuo catches it with his powers first, and then afterwards just screams it to death from rage. And that rage is a pretty important part of the choreography. While Max is way more powerful, this old man is having to keep up with an angsty teen tripped up on universe pills. But once we get this incredible shot of the Earth that helps make the fight scale feel more grand, something that sprite fights have gotten way better at this year, we get into the real meat of what makes this one of my favorites. Now that Mags has gotten this kid on a leash by using the metal arm he had just created, badass, this is normally where the fight would be over since Eric is used to punishing uppity brats. But then we get a moment that up to this point, I wasn't even sure if they'd be able to include. This episode has a lot of great looking hand-drawn shots, and yes, that includes Mag's derpy face, but few moments before or after could compare to Tetsuo's horrifying transformation. This is where those vocals I talked about kick in, and even Eric himself is frozen in fear. As if that moment wasn't shocking enough, we get a scene where thousands of Tetsuo voices and memories bombard Eric's mind, including a subtle Welcome to Die reference, and the part that made me realize how special this episode truly was.
Hurts. Help me.
Tetsuo, in a fleeting moment of humanity, begged Mags for help. When has anything close to that kind of humility or desperation ever happened on the show? This level of stakes invested me in a completely new way. Even Mag's eyes changed for a moment. Up to now, they had been pure black, as he's completely detached from Tetsuo's story. But now that he understands that this is a kid in need of rescuing, it humanized him. This is reflective in his sprites, and it was a great way to represent his arc from the comics. From here on out, we get even more awesome moments like the bloody buzzsaws foreshadowed from before, and Mags weaponizing the universe. I've gone into excruciating detail before about how powerful the death is and why it's my favorite of the show. I still stand by that statement. It really does give me chills every time hearing Tetsuo thank Mags for his act of generosity from beyond as Eric calmly replies,
"You are welcome."
Without a hint of malice or sarcasm. How fitting is it that two of my favorite deaths are from back-to-back episodes, yet they couldn't be more different from each other in tone and intent. It was great hearing Edward Bosco back as Magneto. He sold the change from crotchety old man to sorrowful mentor beautifully.
I believe I've had enough tantrums to last a lifetime. Impudent child. Poor child.
And Joshua Waters knocked it out of the park as Tetsuo. They know how to portray the rage of a teen while also embodying the tragic nature of Tetsuo's story.
Wrong country, Grandpa! You're an Akira turf now! I'll kill you. I'll kill you! Thank you.
How this isn't my number one is just as shocking to me as it is to some of you. I cannot stress enough how insanely difficult it was for me to pick a favorite. My top two managed to tell their own stories fitting to the respective characters used, and even though they're wildly different in tone, both of their emotional moments hit hard. While my opinion could change on a dime, I had to ask myself, do I go with the one that respectfully tackles body horror and psychological trauma, or the gag-filled episode featuring a cartoon character that has brought smiles to so many people? It may be that I'm biased, but my number one has to be...
Wait, hold it. Say that sentence again.
It may be that I'm...
No, before that.
Do I go with the...
Too long, second half of the sentence.
Features a cartoon character...
Stop! Say it again.
Cartoon character.
Again.
Cartoon.
Louder.
Cartoon.
Louder.
Cartoon.
Louder!
Cartoon!
Cartoon? Oh, nuts! That was my cue! Not as much as...
Oh, forget it. The moment's passed.
That's it! Would somebody or some pony please tell me what's going on around here?
Ooh, I know this one! So there I was, working on my Super Mondo Butter Bars to celebrate Rarity's latest boutique expansion when I got a call on the phone, which is kind of weird since I don't remember owning one, but I answered anyway and got invited by my favorite red and black buddy to show him how the art of party crashing is done. Something about teaching you a lesson and why you should listen to Wade's suggestions more. I don't know, I'm still kind of fuzzy on those details since I heard the word party and just kind of bolted over as soon as I could, though I might have been a little too excited since my cue listening skills still need work. Want a Super Mondo Butter Bar?
Maybe later. So that's what this is about, Wade? You've resorted to manufacturing drama? We've been over this, dude. People are sick of the side plots. They just want the reviews.
And that's the problem. You can't just bend to the people's whim like some kind of straw that bends. The surprise cameos are a key part of our identity. They help set us apart.
This is still my show, Wade!
Oh. I see how it is.
Wade, come on, I didn't mean to—
No, it's good that we're being honest with each other. And here I thought we were partners.
And we still are, but partners don't go behind each other's backs like this. You shouldn't feel like you can't run stuff by me.
Well, pardon me if I've been feeling like I can't. I mean, for Pete's sake, you didn't even notice I was gone for 3 weeks when I was a puddle on your lawn. Sometimes it feels like you don't even care what I have to say anymore.
You're right. I'm sorry, Wade. I should have been more thoughtful. Forgive me?
Well, hey, that's what friends do, right?
So, any suggestions for the rest of this video?
I want Pinky to help with the next entry.
Please? It feels like forever and a half since I've gotten to interact with fans. After the show ended, the main things I've had to look forward to were Magpie Pony videos and the Anthology series.
Oh yeah, I love the Anthology series. Especially the latest one and its running gag about the jar.
We don't talk about the jar. Anyhoozle, what do you say, Nate?
Well, it has been a while. This could be a good chance to catch up.
Yeah, speaking of which, I wasn't sure if it was just because of the poor reception in Ponyville, but there's something different about you, Pinky.
I feel like I could say the same about you, Wade. You didn't tell me you got chibi-fied. You look hysterical.
Oh, please. Like you're one to talk when it comes to redesigns.
Oh, that was just a phase.
I think the word you're looking for is mistake.
Okay, that's enough, guys. I think we'd better get things back on track before another mask situation manifests. Not to mention you're in luck, Pinky. I have a feeling you'll be able to relate to one of the characters here in a pretty meaningful way.
Ooh, is it Homelander?
Wait, what?
'Cause we both love loads of syrup on our pancakes.
Yeah, no. It's actually—
Anybody who's spent any substantial amount of time trying to analyze theoretical power of cartoon characters
is a genius and should be given Nobel Peace Prize.
Yeah, I was gonna say deserves to be shot, but not deadly shot.
It's like shot full of compliments.
Yeah, shot full of compliments, but it misses all of their organs, and then during physical therapy, they get stronger than they've ever been in their life. And then they get a little bit overconfident, and some dude in a bar picks a fight with them, and they're like, you know what? My power level is 45 right now. I could beat this guy's ass. They get into a real fucking fight and see how it works, and then you tell me who would win in a goddamn fight between Goku and SpongeBob.
SpongeBob SquarePants versus Super Friends Aquaman.
Oh, yeah, that makes a bit more sense. SpongeBob is awesome.
No kidding. When this episode was announced, it was an exciting moment for SpongeBob SquarePants fans who were ready to see this little guy blow the minds of everyone who doubted what a children's character was capable of. Again. But then we found out his opponent.
If Omni-Man versus Homelander was a diarrhea stomp, then this was,
An explosive diarrhea stomp? That's the worst kind there is.
Honestly, I'd say that works. Surely they couldn't have been serious. But they were, to an extent at least. They went into the research thinking it might actually be close. And then it wasn't. And they already had all this work done, so it would have been stupid to waste it. And that's where this episode's unique identity comes in. With the way the analysis is handled, I'm somewhat inclined to call this episode a parody of the show. Don't believe me? If the matchup wasn't a dead ringer, Wiz even says that's right, Boomstick, and claims that it was an extremely close match. Methinks they're starting to get self-aware.
But that doesn't make make it a bad thing. Meta humor has gotten a bad rep lately, but take it from Ponyville's top expert on comedy when I say that it can still be funny when done in earnest.
Coming in for a hard landing, Tails. You got me covered?
Roger.
Who's Roger? He's talking to me.
The characters chosen allow our host to delve into the opposite extremes of versus debating, underestimating, and overestimating.
And I thought Raiden vs. Excalibur was funny. Ben truly shined with his voice acting in this one. It was funny seeing him undergo two different character arcs. One where he tried his absolute best to justify using Super Friends Aquaman, and another where he went from making fun of SpongeBob to fearing him like a god. And with the former, I was right there with Wiz. Be honest, has anyone here actually seen the entirety of Super Friends before this episode was announced?
Don't look at me. I'm a Marvel.
And I've already got super duper friends at home.
My point exactly. So it was actually kind of surprising to see Robot Chicken be proven right, because I thought that surely there must have been something there. And hey, there was, just not in the traditional way. Boomstick had some great moments of bouncing off Wiz's flickering sanity and even reining the chaos in for once. Even so, it doesn't feel completely disrespectful towards Arthur, just disappointed more than anything. They still try to find some silver linings like calling him a true hero. I know I certainly wouldn't pick a fight with him, just as long as it's not in the water. Same goes for SpongeBob, whose analysis reminded me of Poe's in that they had to overcome being treated like jokes both on the show and their home series. The analysis was also chock full of deep cuts and some of the best black boxes yet. Even the pre-fight announcement stands out. Another aspect of the show Season 9 has been experimenting with.
It's time for Aquaman's funeral!
And I thought I had it rough in my Versus the Mask episode.
I still think you're cool, Wade.
And that is why we are still friends.
Hey, this is the part where you talk about the animation now, right? I bet this one's going to be super funny, fun!
That's right, Pinky, but much like our fighters, there's a bit more to this one than what lies above the surface. The sprite team did a phenomenal job translating the Toon Force powers of these two that we're all accustomed to, even down to the hyper-detailed close-ups we get, one of which might be the hardest I've laughed all season. Origin's always a badass, but he really knocked it out of the park with these SpongeBob sprites, and I'm pretty sure he just happened to have those on hand since he was just making them for fun. Shout out to Gus, John, and Zach as well for the animation.
I'm impressed by the amount of squash and stretch they pulled off. You can really pull a muscle if you're not careful. This is one of the funniest fights on the show, and there's a good reason for that. One of the biggest problems with recent SpongeBob episodes and why they aren't nearly as beloved as the first 3 seasons is the animation. Not that it's bad, far from it in fact, but it might be too good, if that makes sense. It feels like they wanted to make every single frame of the show the next big meme, but when you keep doing all these exaggerated faces or live-action bits over and over again, it loses its impact and makes everything weightless. Ripped Pants even had the exact same lesson about running a gimmick into the ground. There's a time and a place for silly faces, gosh darn it! That's what makes it work so well here. With how rare us Toon Forcers are in the show, moments like Great Neptune or Doodle Whiz are actually funny since we never would have imagined them on a death battle in the first place. Expectations have the chance to be subverted, and that slapstick is so well timed. Most people would do the scene like the bubble missile by having Arthur get launched off screen after one hit and just be done with it. But they went the extra mile by including the oh-so-important pause for effect with some well-picked sound bites. Keep your books, Twilight. The Hanna-Barbera Audio Archive is the only library I'll ever need. Unless it's a culinary library, I'd probably go out of business without enough recipes.
Speaking of cuisines, I think it's time to talk about the part of this episode where the crew was truly cooking. Arthur realizes just how outmatched he is and loses it. Not in the murdery psycho way like Homie, but more of a soul-crushing what am I doing with my life kind of losing it. And keeping in line with the season's theme, SpongeBob gets a moment to be in character and actually feel bad for Arthur, even motivating him to get back up by relaying his own experiences of feeling inadequate. That's the kind of pep talk I think everyone needs to hear. Simply existing can be so hard sometimes. It can seem impossible to live up to everyone's expectations, even our own.
That's why simply telling someone you matter can be way more helpful than you think. Sometimes even I have to grapple with the thought that I might just be a clone and the original Pinkie Pie is still out there lost and planning to usurp me. But then I remember the Sparkle-rific friends by my side and realize that everything's gonna be okay.
After that fun little bit of therapy, the pace picks back up and we get some great back and forth between the two. Arthur may have thought SpongeBob was a villain at first, but now the two are fighting more like a friendly spar. And you all know how much we love those kinds of fights here. Then Arthur sends SpongeBob to the edge of the freaking universe. Thanks for informing us, Liam. And we get my favorite line read of the show. You heard me right. Not the episode, not even the season. This right here is my favorite line read of the whole fucking show. Hearing so much power and energy behind my childhood catchphrase has given me a new lease on life. And then the two have their parallel yet different self-motivating moments before one of the coolest planetary collisions you'll ever see, mostly because Columbo was there, followed by an out-of-nowhere tearjerker. Tanjiro vs. Jonathan did not make me cry. SpongeBob vs. Aquaman made me cry like a baby.
All SpongeBob wanted was to help Arthur feel better and give him a chance to show what he can do, not knowing his own strength. But Arthur didn't hold it against him since he knew he had good intentions all along, calling him a friend in his final words. And then SpongeBob gave him a grief, calling him number one. I'm sorry. I can't hold it in anymore. Why didn't you guys tell me how sad this one would be?
Chill out, Pinky. Don't be weird. It's just a death battle.
And it's heartbreaking. You're the weird one for not crying.
Me? What about Nate?
You know that he cries on the inside.
It's true. I'm with Pinky on this one. As if that wasn't sad enough, the grave was marked Ocean Man. This could be seen as just another part of the running gag with SpongeBob butchering Arthur's name, but it felt like an intentional thing done out of respect this time. Arthur was more than just a guy in the water. To SpongeBob, he was as important as the entire ocean. And then it makes you think about the movie. And by proxy, Steven Hillenburg. And yeah, this episode is everything I could have asked for. Ocean Men might be one of those tracks that doesn't make sense on its own, but it feels like such a love letter to the SpongeBob sound font and works as a great homage to old superhero shows with its boogie-woogie tone. While some people were reasonably hoping for solid JJ, Keston Howard continues to impress me with his ability to take silly characters and make them work for emotionally charged moments. The Captain Falcon voice actor is great at yelling. Who knew?
And as the king of the seas, he's mine to command! Great Neptune!
And with Tom Shulk, I'm convinced at this point that we may never know the full extent of his range. I'm not even sure he does.
Evildoer? I'm a hero!
I saved this city!
How about a little karate, Waterman?
It's not a perfect impression and could have been a little higher on a couple lines, but that hardly matters when it not only embodies SpongeBob, but also has the emotional range to work in a setting like Death Battle. And I wasn't joking about this line read. I said it and I'm sticking to it.
I'll prove it to you. I'll be a real superhero.
This episode isn't perfect, the portals were pretty shoehorned, it's fairly easy to predict what direction both analysis segments are going in, and that Rokan scaling felt pretty generous even by Death Battle standards. But when an episode can make me this happy and sad at the same time while acting as a loving homage to corny superheroes in my childhood, does it really matter that much? I could spend this time just listing off all the references and we'd be here all day. It feels incredible to finally have something SpongeBob related that doesn't suck after many years of disappointment. Fucking pal for Gary, man. What were they thinking? As for the versus side of things, I'd rather not get into the debates of how powerful SpongeBob truly is. At this point, I'm starting to wonder if 30 billion Gokus versus SpongeBob would be a more fair debate. But no matter how you feel about Toon Force, we can all at least definitively agree on one thing. SpongeBob versus Popeye would kick ass and you know it. Now that we've got everything ranked, it's finally time.
Thanks for the tip!
Oh, come on, Wade.
Hey, don't look at me. She was a degenerate prankster way before we met.
That's fair.
All right, it's time to look back at every episode and review them in 10 words or less. Ready? Go! Joker? I hardly know her. Oh god, she likes it. But seriously, why did this give us so many views? A flawed ending that I'm happy was included. We sure they didn't stab Lonnie? It's happened before. Here comes the airplane! That's so sad. Alexa, play Ego Death. The Goku vs. Superman 2 we deserved. A fight as inconsistent as John's dreadlock physics. Typical versus debater. Oh, cock, but no cum.
What?
Still looks better than every Don't Nod game. Brought to you by Black Adam the movie. Congratulations, Silver! Now get back in the Sega basement. And yet Fury of the Gods bombed harder. Starring Joe Victim and 2 other guys. The fuck's a book? If Guy didn't kill him, his secondhand embarrassment would've. Hey, so remember what happened to 1 Minute Melee? When it comes to iconic moments, Season 2 can't be beat. Season 5's influence on the show is present to this day, a majority of Season 6's deaths still hold up, and it's difficult to compete with Season 8's highest highs. But I still think Season 9 is the best. 2 words. It is consistent. While I'm still debating if I like anything from 9 more than my top 3 of Season 8, ask anyone their favorites from a season, and while they obviously won't all be the same, you're likely going to run into overlap more often than not. With Season 1, there's Goku vs. Superman, Season 4 has Balrog vs. TJ combo, even Season 3 has Hulk vs. Doomsday. No offense, Pinky.
None taken. I love that one too. Cars aren't supposed to go on your hands, silly.
But with Season 9, this overlap isn't nearly as present. I'm not even super confident in my own ranking. And that variety is indicative of how balanced this season is. The Marvel vs. DC episodes were inoffensive, and even the other ones managed to stand out in ways we couldn't have predicted. Every animation has felt completely unique and character-driven. They all offer a totally different experience. While the comedy could still use a little bit of work, the analyses feel way more fine-tuned at taking us through these characters' lives as well as expanding the lore of Wiz and Boomstick a little bit more. Peppering in Ringmaster, Jocelyn, and Dummy throughout the analyses didn't feel distracting at all. If anything, it made them more dynamic and fun. The push to bring in more and more new franchises was a breath of fresh air. And Liam freaking killed it in the writing department, taking on more than half of this year's lineup. And the others weren't half bad either. Herschel had some great outings, both of Ultra Guys were in my top 5, and DJ had arguably the best writing debut of the series. Never have the Sprite episodes looked this incredible. Even the mid-fights have some breathtaking shots and imagery. Other highlights I find neat are DC finally losing to series that aren't Marvel, Silver redeeming himself in one of the biggest upsets of Versus history, it wasn't even the only one this season, a sponsored episode of legitimate quality, and the biggest one of all, the Champions Poll. Thanks to the Death Battle Champions program, fans actually got a chance to give input on the show in a way that was unprecedented. And there are many YouTube channels out there that are this dedicated to making the audience feel heard. It was also just a lot of fun. I can't wait for the next one. And considering the episodes that won the vote, among other fights we know of, I have a sneaking suspicion that Season 9, the season that set a new bar in storytelling, artistry, laughs, action, and consistent quality, might be getting a run for its money already. I'm not saying to get too hyped for Season 10, but there really has never been a better time to be a fan of Death.
Oh my gosh, I totally forgot!
Dang it, Pinky, I was on a roll there too.
Sorry, Nate, but when you started talking about Season 10, I just remembered the other reason I came by here.
Let me guess. A note?
Well, I do love a good ditty, but now's not the time. It's a message.
A message?
Yeah, for you, Nate.
Is this thing on? Salutations, my exceedingly dull friend! A little pony told me that you and a bunch of others wanted me to appear on your little death battle program. Well, obviously I could think of a million better things to do. My packed schedule just so happened to be free that day. And besides, everything's better when the Lord of Chaos is involved.
Son of a bitch.
Obviously, some things will have to be changed when I make the scene. The audience wants what it wants, after all. I do hope you look forward to it. However, the reason I wanted to contact you specifically is because of the nature of your little review, whatever you call it these days. So don't be surprised when a little bit of chaos pops in unannounced. But I am a gentleman, so I figured you at least deserved a fair warning of things to come. And remember, you've brought this upon yourself. P.S. Don't forget to prepare some refreshments for us.
Oh man, this is gonna wait us.
He's probably talking about me. What's up, Peach Fuzz?
What the fuck?